Well, most of the media remains absolutely consumed by the Trump regime's scandals, especially right now the Jeffrey Epstein files scandal, lawsuits, and culture war stunts. Behind the scenes, the White House is executing a calculated and deeply anti-democratic strategy in advance of the 2026 midterms. This has nothing to do with campaigning. This is about controlling the outcome of those elections before a single vote is even cast. This is incredibly important. We need to keep our eyes on it. So,
Mary Trump doesn't just roast Donald, she drags him from the family dinner table straight to the Oval Office, torching everything in between. With insider receipts on his vanity, denial, and chaos, she shows how the same flaws that tanked his businesses are now steering the country into disaster. From failed policies to gold-plated insecurities. She exposes his presidency as the ultimate family embarrassment, proof that sometimes the most savage truth comes from your own bloodline.
You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it.
It's despicable. Also, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I think that's the first time he's ever heard any part of the Constitution in his life. He's a deeply ignorant, cruel man who seems to forget that his father was a first-generation American. So if it hadn't been for birthright citizenship, my grandfather probably wouldn't.
Donald Trump as president. It's like putting your most clueless cousin in charge of air traffic control. Mary doesn't need to exaggerate. She just opens the family archives and lets the dysfunction speak for itself. She remembers the kid who cheated at Monopoly, the teen obsessed with his reflection, and the adult who turned every family meal into a bragging contest. Now that same guy is running a nation. Her roast makes it sound like America handed the nuclear codes to the families. Drunk uncle.
How do we celebrate democracy when the people in power are doing everything in their power to dismantle it? How do we celebrate our freedoms when Donald Trump and his enablers and his fellow travelers in the fascist Republican Party want to make sure that people they don't like, people they disagree with, people who do not look like them or believe like them, no longer?
Mary doesn't roast from the sidelines. She cuts from inside the tent. She's seen the playbook firsthand. Inflated ego, no interest in advice, and it's not my fault before the question is even finished. Under her lens, Trump's presidency isn't history in the making, is a rerun of every bad choice he's ever made, scaled into national disasters. Watching him govern feels like being stuck in a family argument where one side has all the facts, and the other just yells, "I'm the best," louder each time.
I rarely agree with anything Donald Trump says. In fact, I think it's safe to say that I practically never agree with anything he says. But last week, after a legally executed search warrant was produced and an entirely illegal search was conducted at his premises, he told his fellow Republicans that they should not vote in the midterms because the DOJ was treating him so unfairly. Did you hear that? Donald Trump told Republicans not to vote in the midterms. I completely concur and encourage you to stay.
Mary demolishes the myth of Trump, the business genius. In the family, success often meant losing millions, suing partners, then bragging about it on TV. He brought that same playbook to Washington. Declare victory first, check the results later, and blame anyone nearby when the scoreboard doesn't match the speech. Her sarcasm drips as she points out how he claimed to fix America while the economy sputtered. Allies rolled their eyes, and his own staff bolted faster than subpoenas could be delivered.
So Donald Trump is out there waving the American flag, a flag he has desecrated more times than I can count. Meanwhile, what he's actually doing or allowing to be done in his name is exactly what our founders desperately were trying to free us from. He is trying to become a tyrant. He is desperate to become an authoritarian. And quite frankly, there are far too many people who were helping him do those things. So, tyranny, repression, persecution, and the dismantling.
When Mary breaks down his administration, it plays like a bad sitcom, a cabinet of sycophants competing to survive 1 week without being fired, policies made on impulse, and press briefings that feel like a show with no writers. The chaos isn't accidentally, it's the entire script. To her, it's just the family dynamic scaled up. Donald, at the head of the table, talking over everyone, declaring himself the smartest, then storming off when someone points out he just contradicted himself.
According to internal White House sources and new reporting from Axios, the Trump regime is already deploying what senior advisor Chris LaCivita has called a quote-unquote multi-dimensional effort to keep and expand congressional control, not just through endorsements or fundraising, but by rewriting the rules of the game.
Mary shreds his obsession with loyalty, which in Trump speak means agree with him even when he's dead wrong. That's how you end up with an administration nodding along to ideas that sound like they came out of a wild game of family charades. The scary part? Those ideas become actual policies. His decision-making hasn't evolved since his 20s only. Now the stakes are nuclear. She reminds us of his pre-politics years, too, built on endless self-promotion and smoke and mirrors. Branding. As president, that same obsession with appearances ran the entire operation. Family Donald walked away from messes, pretending it wasn't his problem. Presidential Donald did the same thing with hurricanes, pandemics, and global crises.
But let's stop saying we and us, okay? It's them. It's these power-hungry murderers who care no more about our actual living, beautiful, wondrous children than they do about the goddamn clump of cells they pretend to revere. And it is we, those of us who value life, who would do anything to keep our children safe and create a world in which they can thrive and even survive until adulthood, who need to hang these murders around the Republicans' necks and let the blood of our children, who are dead as a direct result of their willful inaction, stain them forever.
Mary shows how, in moments that demanded steady leadership. Donald treated them like PR stunts, measuring applause, not solutions. His relationship with truth, a lifetime losing battle. He doesn't just lie, he rebuilds reality every morning. To suit his mood, facts optional, consistency irrelevant. Whatever gets the biggest reaction becomes truth. That turned the presidency into a 24/7 circus of scandals. Fact-checkers burning out, and a nation living on edge. Diplomacy got replaced with showboating strategy, replaced with whatever sounded good for the next press release. World leaders, she says, learn to handle him like the family always did, nod politely. Let him rant, then get back to real work once he leaves the room.
I had the great good fortune to be interviewed by Katie Couric again on her Substack for Substack Live. And as always with Katie, it was a wide-ranging conversation that focused on some of the most public scandals that the Trump regime is dealing with right now, but also dug deep on some things that aren't getting enough attention.
Mary doesn't skip the economy either. Trump's economic victories sound a lot like his business bragging flashy announcements. No sustainability, she draws the parallel. The developer who built shiny projects that collapsed is now the president, bragging about short-term wins while ignoring the long-term mess. It's financial whack-a-mole-fix, one headline. 3 others crash quietly in the background. The nonstop staff turnover becomes another punchline. To Mary, the White House resembled family events where guests arrived hopeful, then stormed, out swearing never to return, the ones who stayed. Not the brightest, just the best at pretending the chaos was genius.
Help. But let's pretend that the first constitutional crisis was on Election Day, November 2024, when 74 million Americans knowingly re-elected a man who is a traitor to his own country, a man who incited an insurrectionist, a man who has proven himself time and time again to be both anti-American and anti-constitutional.
By the end, Mary's turned her uncle's presidency into a brutal case study of how personal flaws scale into national disasters. This isn't just incompetence, it's incompetence with a megaphone and a federal budget. She strips away the branding, slogans, and staged photo ops to reveal the same man she's always known only now. Instead of ruining family plans, he's steering the entire country into walls he swears don't exist. She finds comedy in his obsession with crowd. Size's Tua, family quirk, turned national obsession. A dozen people in a room became hundreds in his retelling. Now it's presidential rallies where drone shots expose the sad truth. For Mary, it's not strategy, just insecurity that never outgrew high school. She skewers his government staffing, choices with the same savagery she'd use on an overcooked holiday turkey.
It also redirects federal resources so that affected homeless people are transferred to rehabilitation and substance misuse facilities. This means that Donald is ordering the DOJ to roll back decades of legal protections that keep local governments from rounding up unhoused people en masse and forcing them into institutions without their consent. In other words, treating them like criminals.
This is how you end up with unqualified appointees running critical agencies people, more focused on pleasing Trump than doing the job. Mary compares it to a botched family hiring spree, where the only requirement is, will you nod when I'm wrong? Nepotism gets its spotlight too. He dragged his kids and in-laws into powerful roles like it was another family real estate deal. Except this time the stakes were foreign policy and national security. She calls it straight unearned power, handed to people who'd never get those jobs anywhere else. His sweeping reforms, mostly executive orders and headline-chasing stunts that collapse under scrutiny. It's governance as performance, art like slapping paint on a crumbling building and calling it renovated.
How many constitutional crises can one country stand? How many constitutional crises are we currently in? And when was the first one? For my money, the first one was on November 9th, 2016. But, I'm not saying I'm right about that, except I do find it troubling that so many people in the United States of America, including, it would seem, both major political parties and the courts, seem not to have a problem with the fact that a hostile foreign power manipulated our election and helped elect the man who was more than willing to take said hostile foreign power's help.
And then there's his crackdown on the vulnerable. Mary points out how he shifted his focus to criminalizing homelessness, signing an executive order on July 25th that essentially targeted the unhoused. Very next day, he bragged about it. During one of those chaotic chopper talks where he yells over a helicopter noise so no one can really hear the details, it's governance by soundbite chaos disguised as leadership.
When it comes to rounding up American citizens, Donald is getting increasingly adept, and he has found a way to expand the number of Americans he is targeting. Now it's the unhoused. On July 25th, he signed an executive order that effectively criminalizes homelessness. The very next day, he bragged about it on the White House lawn during yet another copter talk. Remember that? When he talks to a gaggle of press while the helicopter is standing nearby waiting for him to get into it so nobody can really hear what he has to say.